I am Steven Michael Hoyt, Senior. I'm 93 years old, and I lived in Des Peres for over 50 years.
And today's date?
And today's date is,
Right here.
March 12th, 2025.
Can you please tell us a little bit about the Dougherty Ridge subdivision, how you found it, and you were still an original owner?
Well, John Kelly was a neighbor of mine in Baldwin. And John lived 2 doors from me. And his brother lived right behind him. And John and I were good friends, and we were involved in Indian guides together with our children. So we got to be pretty good buddies. And he wanted me to buy a house in Des Peres. He said it'd be a good move. And he finally convinced me, and I spent a good deal of time with him during the initial development of the property. He was trying to get a permit to tear it all up and make it into a subdivision. So he drugged me up there to a Des Peres committee meeting, and finally he got it resolved, and he sold me a house, and I was the first one to move in. First house he built, and we had a lot of negotiation about the house, because my house is the only brick house in the subdivision.
What did he bring?
And about the cathedral ceiling and the windows being Anderson, and on and on and on we went, John. But I must have driven John nuts.
What year did you move in?
Oh golly.
1975.
Yeah, that's about right. 75 or 74.
And the 2 brothers had a disagreement, so how did that happen?
Somewhere during the development of the subdivision, John and his brother Tom, who were neighbors in Baldwin, they lived right next to one another. They had a disagreement. I don't know what the disagreement was. I never got involved in that. But they split, and they divided the subdivision in half. And John took the westernmost portion of it, and Tom took the easternmost portion of it.
I think at one time Tom's section was called Lafayette Estates.
Could have been. Anyway, they just continued on. You can always tell where John's houses were built, where Tom's houses were built. I'm telling you this because it meant something to me anyway. Tom only put in asphalt driveways, and John put in concrete driveways. And about the second house that was occupied was occupied by the Arthur Klein family. About the same time, not much difference in time. And we've been friends for super time, forever, ever since she moved in. And we walked together for over 30 years.
Yes, we did, Stephen.
And we talked all about Arthur and all that, what a rascal he was. That's not really, we never talked about you.
Now, Tom Kelly's, the second part of the subdivision, those houses were just a little bit more expensive than Tom Kelly's.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't know why, because they're exactly the same houses.
Right.
I can't tell the difference, except for the driveways,
Yeah.
which over the years have gone from being asphalt to concrete, a lot of them. And initially the road, main road, and I can't remember the name of it, what is it?
Dougherty Ridge Road,
Yeah, the one that comes up from the
Barrett Station.
It was supposed to go all the way straight through to Barrett Station. And they had some conflict with the city, And they didn't want them to put or maybe the people, I don't remember which now. But they made them put that cul-de-sac where you live, so that you couldn't go through.
And do you remember that where the cul-de-sac is, in Hunter Creek Ridge Court, that was De Pere, and the big hill going down was unincorporated.
Yeah,
So the snowplow would come go in our cul-de-sac, but they wouldn't clean the road going down to Barrett Station. Till later on, it was incorporated
yeah.
into Pere.
I don't really remember that, but that's true, now that you bring it up.
Do you remember who owned that property or what it was for before they built
I think
on
it belonged to the Lindemans. And they were members of St. Paul's Church, the Lindemans. And he died, and then she remarried. No, wait a minute, she wasn't, her first husband was not a Lindeman. The second husband was a Lindeman. And I still stay in touch with her all the time. Versa, she was but the old house was the Lindeman farmhouse, the big old white one in the middle of the subdivision.
Right.
That was Lindeman's house, and I still think there's a road somewhere in De Pere named Lindeman, isn't there?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Was it a dairy farm, do you recall?
It would almost have to be. I don't honestly know. But you know, it wasn't, it was so hilly, as we know, Joyce and I, because we had to crawl up the hill, and we used to get worn out. We'd get up the top of the hill and we'd sit on the bench in the woods there. It was put in after Mrs. Moore passed, and the sad thing for me was they tore down her house.
Oh, let's talk about Mrs. Moore. So Mrs. Moore donated her property.
She donated her property to the Missouri Conservation Commission when she passed.
And now it's called Phantom Forest.
And it was called Phantom Forest because her husband was an illustrator or artist of the Phantom, which was a comic book back in the 50s and 60s. And he used to drive around the subdivision. I never knew him, but I always saw him. He drove an old Jeep, World War II Jeep, around in his area, and he only had one arm, so he was always driving with one arm. But I never got to know him. Mrs. Moore and I were good buddies. We would go out and wander the woods in the spring and check all the wildflowers.
What kind of wildflowers did she have?
Well, bloodroot was the big one, but she also overpowered them with daffodils. Those weren't wild. She planted a jillion daffodils back there. I guess they're still there. I don't know. And she and I would walk around, and she said, and I only remember bloodroot, and I don't know why. She always said, "You know that one? You know that one? You know that one?"
So she was a friendly neighbor to you because your backyard backed up to her property.
Right to it, yes. We were good friends, and I liked her a lot. And she was crazy about her wildflowers and her daffodils. And you know, her house was torn down when the Missouri Conservation Department inherited it, and they put that rock back there with a plaque on it about Phantom Forest and why it was Phantom Forest. I haven't seen that in years, but
You and I used to walk the path
yes.
quite often.
We walked the path, and we get to the top of the hill. We'd start at the bottom almost always. We'd walk to the top of the hill, and then we'd have to sit down on the bench that was up there and rest. But it was a shame that they tore the house down. I don't, what they'd have done with it, I don't know, but it was a really neat old cedar-sided house.
How do you think she decided to leave her property to the Department of
She
Conservation?
never told me. I figured she didn't have any family, so she found out that she liked the woods and the wild stuff and the wildflowers, everything, so it was part of her need to keep it the way it was when she was there.
How
So
many acres do you think she donated?
she had 16 acres, I think.
Okay.
And then the, what do they call the other part?
Bittersweet Woods.
Bittersweet Woods was another 10. So that between the two of them, there were about 26 acres.
And that will always be green space.
At least hers will. I don't know what the deal is on the
Yeah.
Bittersweet.
Was that Mrs. Goodson that donated?
Yeah, I think so. They used to have a big white house down there.
Right,
It was really a big house.
right.
They tore that down too. They don't want that old. They still got the original farmhouse though that the Lindemans had is still at the top of the hill, and it's occupied by. I don't know the people that live there. Do you?
Loving Good, Dr. Loving Good and his,
Never knew him,
and his
but
family.
They're still living there after all these years,
Mhm.
and we've been there a long time. 50 years.
And Steve, anything else you wanted to talk about Japan? You remember when you first moved in?
Well, things like there was a huge over where the financial building is over there. What's the name of it, Joyce?
Edward Jones.
Edward Jones. That used to be a quarry, huge quarry, and they spent years filling that thing up. Oh, trucks were going constantly filling that quarry up. Other than that, it's we had a flood once.
Tell us about the flood.
I think that was about 93. And the flood, it flooded Barrett Station Road. Of course, we were,
How high was the water, would you say, on Barrett Station?
I don't really know. But I know we had, it wasn't very passable. And, but we were fortunate, we were on top of the hill. We didn't have to worry about the flood. I still think about that. How smart we were to live on top of the hill, huh, Arthur? But then they built a levee along that creek
Right.
so that it wouldn't flood anymore. It never has flooded since. Another problem that the subdivision had is in order to supply electricity to the subdivision, they had a overhead 12 kV line that came up from Barrett Station and supplied our part, at least our part of the subdivision, I know. And we had them, I got it buried. And
Yes, tell us who you worked for.
I worked for Union Electric. And then in 1994, when I retired, they decided they didn't want to call it Union Electric anymore. They changed it to Ameren. And then over the years, it became Ameren, Illinois and Ameren, Missouri.
So before they buried the cable, we would get, our electricity would go out.
Oh, every
All
time the
the
wind
time.
blew.
Right,
If the wind blew or a storm, the electricity would go out. Because those were on wood poles, coming 12 kV line, coming up through the woods. And, you know, it'd get banged around and we'd be we'd be blacked out. But then they buried it, we never had another outage. There was a big fuss about the 1238 kV tower over there on the main drag,
Hunter Creek Road.
Hunter Creek Road. And they were not allowed, they wanted to plant evergreens around it. And Union Electric or Ameren, whatever it was at the time, wouldn't let them build it, because they thought it'd grow up and cause problems. But, you know, not evergreens. They would never have bothered that. That's my opinion as a member of the control center that controlled all that stuff. Yeah, and I did work for Ameren for 35 years. Love my job. Go back tomorrow.
Well, Steve, thank you for reminiscing about De Pere.
Better shut me up, because I can. I love De Pere.
No, it's been a pleasure.
St. Paul's.
And you're a member of St. Paul's. Can you tell us a little bit about St. Paul's?
Well, St. Paul's was 175 years old this year. And they went through starting out with a log cabin, you know, it's 175 years ago. And they managed to get rid of that by burning it to the ground. And you can understand they were heating it with wood. And then they went from there through that whole scenario. There were one-room schoolhouse and then a brick church, and finally and the cemetery for St. Paul's is right next to where the old church was. I mean, that's why the cemetery is where it is, because the church used to be down there. Now, when they bought the corner, I don't know, but
You've been a member since 1975.
74, I guess. And I guess you don't want me to talk about the fact that I was a Catholic, and I can't find a lot of difference between the Catholics and the Lutherans. And Norma was a Lutheran, and so that's probably why I became a Lutheran, or I might still be a Catholic. But I call myself a hybrid, because I'm still, you know, I still remember, she was always trying to convert me, Joyce Ann, who I'm looking at right now. She was always trying to bring me back to the Catholic religion.
Do you remember West County's shopping center being built?
No. The only reason I ever went to West County is because of Macy's.
Right. Okay, Steve, I think we'll just kind of end there, and thank you for sharing all your memories of Dougherty Ridge subdivision. And
I could probably go on if you let me go, but that was enough. And I had the grandest neighbors anybody could ever have on the top of the hill in Dougherty Woods. It was everybody, the Kleins, the Rices, the Mungles, the Carts, and so on. Great people. I don't remember all the people that moved away, but those are the people that are still there.
Okay, thank you, Steve, very much.